court.
think, what are we doing? Some work on the dome. Dome had some cracks in it.
Right.
We're doing some of that. Might be putting some funding toward that, and they had some other requests they were asking us
Well,
for
the
funding.
heating and air.
Well, that's a
this
huge
thing,
one.
Yeah,
And we didn't have a lot to do. They had legislature funding for that,
yeah.
but we had to separate the governor's mansion off of it.
Oh, really?
I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln-Lancaster County Planning Commission of May 25th, 2022. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available online or at the Planning Department office, room 213. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. Please note the Planning Commission will be allowing testimony on agenda items by video conferencing for those individuals who have pre-registered. If you parked in the parking lot across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cell phones may not be used in the chamber during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action today is final on the following item, 1.4B, Special Permit 22012. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held May 11th, 2022.
So moved, Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Abstain?
Edgerton.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, the first item is 1.1, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 22007, to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lincoln-Lancaster Comprehensive Plan, amendment to the Lincoln Center Redevelopment Plan, to revise the Lincoln Flats Bank of the West project to adjust the project area and availability of TIF to complete additional right-of-way improvements on property generally located at 1314 O Street. Next item is 1.2, Text Amendment 22001, to amend Lincoln Municipal Code Chapter 27.72, Section 27.72.060 T to allow vehicle stacking for drive-in, drive-through facilities in the rear yard setback in B1, B3, H1, H2, and H3 zoning districts. Next item, 1.3, Text Amendment 22003, to amend Lincoln Municipal Code Section 27.06.170, Heavy Commercial Services Use Group, to allow truck wash facilities as a permitted use in H4 and amend Section 27.63.470A25, Planned Services Commercial pertaining to motor vehicle and or truck wash facility to remove conditions related to vehicle stacking. 1.4A, change of zone 22010, local landmark designation for the Chi Omega House on property generally located at 480 North 16th Street. Next item, 1.4B, special permit 22012, special permit for historic preservation for setback reduction on property generally located at 480 North 16th Street. This is final action. Next item is miscellaneous 1 1.5 Miscellaneous 22005 to revoke special permit 17027 Tallgrass Hills Community Unit Plan on property generally located at Southwest 98th Street and West Yankee Hill Road. Next item, 1.6 Street and Alley Vacation 22001 to vacate existing South 16th Street right-of-way between Lake Street and Harrison Avenue, as well as an unnamed section of right-of-way extending from Harrison Avenue to Perkins Boulevard, all adjacent to Ridge Park on property generally located at South 16th Street from Lake Street to Harrison Street. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No.
Yes.
Oh, just a second. We'll get to you in just a second. Nope, no worries.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites to be disclosed?
No.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this consent agenda, these consent agenda items?
Yes, I do. Randy Overholt.
And which item would you like to speak on?
The Tallgrass Hills.
Grass Hills. Okay, 1.5, miscellaneous 22005? Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on an item on the consent agenda? Okay, with that, we will remove 1.5 to public hearing after the consent agenda is finalized, just so you know. But with that, I think we can take a motion for approval of the rest of the consent agenda.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second, Ball.
Okay, Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, there are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearing. The staff will make a brief presentation. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. You will then have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Shelley, please call the first public hearing item.
The first item will be removed, which is removed from the consent agenda items, is item 1.5, miscellaneous 22005 to revoke special permit 17027 Tallgrass Hills Community Unit Plan on property generally located at Southwest 98th Street and West Yankee Hill Road.
Great.
Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting these sites to be disclosed?
No. Tom?
Good afternoon, Tom Shaka, planning staff. Well, this is a first one for me in over 20 years, so, but it is a application to revoke a special permit. The owner actually had submitted a letter requesting that the special permit be rescinded. However, in our county zoning regulations, there is not a process for a property owner applicant to rescind a special permit. We will be fixing that, and I will be back in 2 weeks to take care of that. So the only way we could do it is by revoking it, where the director of building and safety submits a letter revoking the special permit. The special permit, Tallgrass Hills Community Unit Plan, that was approved in 2017, and it's located on Southwest 98th between Yankee Hill Road and Rokeby Road, 80 acre parcel. And the developer has since decided he doesn't want to have to build a road or do other public improvements that the special permit had required. There was a road coming off of Southwest 98th, kind of more on the northern part of the site. The community unit plan approved this for 5 lots. What the owner has decided to do instead is to come back and just do a final plat on it through ag preservation, which will allow him to do 4 lots. This is something that's administrative, so he can do it by right. So, but instead of having 5 lots, he will only get 4 lots out of it. That's pretty much what this is about, so.
Okay. Questions for Tom? Okay, and then, so you're representing both the applicant and the staff?
The applicant's Director of Building Safety, so I'm kind of representing him, but the property owner's consultant, I believe, is here, if you have any questions for them.
Okay. Any questions for the, not at this time, but thank you. Okay, is there any testimony in support of this application?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Eckert with Civil Design Group here today on behalf of Jim Luers. I don't have much more to say than what was presented by staff. This was simply an issue that the intention is to rescind the special permit because of some of the construction elements that they've now decided they don't want to do, and to do the ag preservation plat, which actually reduces the density out here by 1 unit. So with that, I think staff's in full support, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions right now? Could you state your address for the record?
Yeah, 8535 Executive Woods Drive, Suite 200 here in Lincoln.
Great, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Thank you for coming up here. On the plans that are currently attached to the special permit that shows the 5 lots.
Right.
Is it, do you know how the new 4 lots would lay out?
Fairly similar, yes, in the same location.
In the same location?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, just not meeting the criteria of the road? Is that what we're talking about?
Right. The ag preservation plat requires a 60-foot outlot be platted for a future public road in the event it's ever needed or it was converted to a special permit again back at some point. And so, but it functions as a common driveway instead of a full county road.
Okay, thank you.
Dick?
And if I read things right, you will preserve 75 acres as agricultural?
Right, that's a standard requirement on the ag preservation plats,
Right.
that 75% of the total limits of the area in the plat be preserved as open space, green space, or agriculture.
Right, thank you.
Great, thanks. Any other questions? Thanks, Mike. Other testimony in support? Is there any neutral testimony and testimony in opposition? Come on up. And then just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Randy Overholt, and I live at 9105 Southwest 98th Street, Denton, Nebraska. And I'm here today for me and my wife. I'm a little nervous, so give me a second.
We're not super scary.
I do not do this very often.
It is all good. Take your time.
Tallgrass Hills has been in notice of violation with the DEE from the start of their development for not implementing a proper stormwater prevention plan to control their impact on those downstream. This disregard for the law has caused me great damage from the uncontrolled runoff from the development onto my property. You can see the documents online at DEE. And for the abbreviation of DE, that stands for Department of Environmental Energy. Now, Tallgrass Hills wants to make changes because they failed to properly construct their road as they promised per code as they submitted to the council. Shouldn't these changes been requested first instead of after the fact without prior approval? As it rains right now out there is uncontrolled runoff from Tallgrass Hills onto my farm as they are in non-compliance. My family is now being sued by Jim Lures in Tallgrass Hills for trying to protect my farm from their runoff by I constructed my own sediment on my land to prevent his runoff, and I did that at my own expense. All while completely ignoring the DEE and the laws covering runoff of the TSS sediments. The documents are public at the DEE. I'm begging the council today to look at Tallgrass Hill's situation more closely before approving another plan, and that you will require them to come into full compliance with the DEE and address the damages to my farm and the impact to my family. I have the same printout here. This is my farm right next to their development.
It'll change over in just a second. Okay.
I'm the 20 acres north of Tallgrass Hills, and I'm actually protecting an artesian well, and it's been my lifelong dream to have a catfish pond there, and obviously it's changed, but that's our location there. And one thing that I want to say to the council before I leave is to inform you guys that Tallgrass Hills is either hiding or skipping from the council the adverse possession claim on the north property line of their development. I don't think a survey or a plat can be approved before our court date in October on the boundary dispute. So I can't see how the council can give approval today for their request. Thank you.
Do you have any other, are you finished with what you have? I think we probably have a couple of questions here, so.
Yes.
Dick, do you want to start?
So all the water flows north then towards you?
Yes.
Okay. And is on your picture of the land, their land, is that darker area, is that where it's flowing from?
The tree, the natural tree line?
Yeah, go down, yeah, right in there.
Yes, we actually, we put in a sediment pond that he should have put in on his side of the property. And as you look in today's building around the Lincoln and the county's areas, on anything that's 80 acres, you can see the developers are putting in sediment ponds on their land to control that from the highway culverts, from another person's property, and then they remove it themselves. They pay for that, not me as being a neighbor. But in the meantime, I had to do that because I knew that they weren't following their proper procedures.
So there was a sediment pond on their land earlier?
No.
Okay.
The sediment pond I put on my land to stop because I have a catfish pond and I have an artesian well.
And the catfish pond is up closer to your house there?
It's downstream, so the sediment pond is
Right on the south property line?
yes, it's on the south of the pond, so it has that filtration system and then some grass to go through and then into the pond.
Okay.
And I've taken samples of to the DHHS on what the sediments were prior to the storms and after the storms. And it's in the 400,000s of runoff. And that was their tests.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yeah, appreciate it. Is there any other testimony in opposition? Okay, staff questions?
I would like the city attorney up here.
Actually, it'd be the county attorney.
County attorney.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. John Ward with the Lancaster County Attorney's Office.
Your address, please.
575 South 10th Street.
Thank you.
My question is, with the rescinding of this and then they going for the approval of the 4 lots, would they be required to handle their runoff under that as they would in a city development?
It's my understanding that the owners want to go with an ag preservation route, and I'm not sure if that would change any of the runoff requirements. So I don't know the answer to that.
If I can,
Tom?
the final plat, a final plat does not require a grading and drainage plan to be submitted, but revoking the special permit does not alleviate the requirements of either the NRD or from NDEE. I mean, they still have to follow their regulations, so.
And would their regulations require a sediment pond?
I don't know.
Could we require a sediment pond?
Under
don't.
county zoning regulations, I believe the Planning Commission can take any action they deem necessary and appropriate upon receipt of the report from the Director of Building and Safety, as you've received it in this case. So you could condition a recommendation to the county board on the property owner putting in the sediment pond.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
I was gonna make one correction. Previously, there was a comment about, on the final plats, 75 of the 80 acres would be open space. It's not 75 acres, it's 75% of the 80 acres, so it'd be 60 acres
Okay,
would be
thank
open
you.
space.
Go ahead, Christy.
The gentleman mentioned about the issues that they're having on their own sides. So is that relative to what we're looking at today? I mean, is this something that we should or shouldn't be doing legally?
The Planning Commission at this point has no obligation to address what's going on the other side, since the issue today is just the rescinding of the revocation of the special permit. And like I said with Planning Commission member Campbell, you could make that a part of your recommendation to the county board. But you have no legal obligation to do so.
So Tom, the focus of the special permit and the revocation is about, what this road looks like. The road that would be accessing the 4 properties versus what could have been 5 properties, and the state at which that road must be completed. Is that correct?
I want to be clear, the ag preservation final plat does not require a road to be built. It only requires a 60-foot wide public access easement.
Correct.
Which is basically a driveway.
Understood. So if this special permit were remaining in place, in order to develop the land, the owner would be required to construct this road. My question is that road construction, what impact, if any, would that have regarding drainage to the property to the north? Is that even something that would have an impact on that if it were occurring?
Yeah, Mike Eckert might be better to answer that. But basically, I mean, the special permit was approved and it had a street profile, it had a grading and drainage plan done, and they are to build it according to the approved plans and according to county engineers' specs for road construction for a public road. My understanding is you're not allowed to drain onto an abutting property. Now, whether that is more of a civil case between the two property owners, I'm not sure.
Got it. I'm sorry, sir, at this point, we have moved forward with that process, and we are following up with staff and applicant information.
Roads have already been built.
So the road would have had drainage, a road constructed to, specifications would have drainage requirements and that type of thing. And now, with the road not being required to be built, all of that goes away.
That goes away as far as the road construction, but it's still my understanding you can't drain onto other property.
Got it. Okay. Other questions for staff? All right. Thank you. Yes. That was applicant rebuttal. You were testifying in support, so that testimony is complete as well. We will entertain a motion.
I would move we close the public hearing.
Second, Core?
Shelley?
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
I would move that we approve the revocation and recommend to the county board that there be a settlement pond that would be required on this property. Even though it's a natural drainage way, there is evidently.
I think we just need the motion now, and then
then I can comment.
Justification later.
Okay.
John Ward, Lancaster County Attorney's Office again. Commissioner Campbell, your motion was appropriate, minus the simple revocation piece. Since the county board approved the initial special permit, the planning commission can't take the action that the county board already took, so you would just have to recommend the revocation at this point.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion then is for a recommendation to the county board to revoke the special permit with the addition that a recommendation that a sediment pond be required on the property.
Correct.
So that's the motion in front of us.
Second, Core?
Discussion.
It's a natural drainage way, and a natural drainage way does not require something like this. But with the contest between the two property owners as to extra damage that's being caused because there isn't a sediment pond, if it was a city project, would require one. And so I don't think it hurts at all that we ask the county board to look at making that a requirement also.
Other comments?
This seems like it shouldn't be that hard, but it feels hard now. And with the road being in, because when you drive by that property, so it says that no lots have been created yet because they haven't gone through that part yet. However, it feels like because of that road that from a land use standpoint, it feels a lot more challenging. So us as a commission, how do we deal with those aspects of revoking a special permit that's been started? And so I'm probably leaning towards a no vote at this time because of that logic behind that. But, okay, perfect, thank you.
David Carey with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. I just want to perhaps shed some light on kind of what you're thinking about right now. The action that's being asked of you is I want to make sure the focus is on what's being asked of you, is the revocation of the special permit. Obviously, some information was brought to light during the testimony, during the public hearing, which is appropriate to have on the record and to bring that forward to the county board as well. Keep in mind that the final action here is by the county board because their action on the special permit took place. So that's the process that we are in. So I think the recommendation to you is still to take action on the revocation. The motion that's on the table right now includes consideration to be taken about the drainage topic that was brought up. I think that's appropriate. I'm just letting you know that I don't think you are in a position right now to get into the details of what the special permit was because you're only being asked to revoke the special permit.
Questions of David?
So, I do. So, I understand it's the recommendation to revoke, right? But without understanding the details of it, it's hard to say yay or nay against it, right? Especially given the comments. So, in your response, David, wouldn't we have to understand the details of the permit to make sure that it is sort of the right recommendation from this commission?
Well, what I would point to is what the information that's in the staff report. So I think the staff report does an adequate job of laying out kind of why this is being requested. And then the facts of the matter are that what the landowner is requesting is just to go back to what can be done by right, which is the 4 lots and on this, under the ag preservation. So your action to revoke, which is only a recommendation now to the county board for one thing, but also that what is being, the resulting effect of that approval ultimately would be going back to what would be allowed legally by right. So that's another consideration here. So we're not asking you to take any other additional action to allow the property owner to do anything more than that. In fact, you're taking away a right that's been given to them in the previous process.
Okay. Okay, so what we're voting on is that this property goes back to how it was before. Not ag preservation, not anything other than saying these 80 acres are what they were originally.
Effectively, yes.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Tracy?
Yes. Sorry, Dick.
My concern is that the owner of the property, by right, can put those 4 lots in, and that there's no requirement that they assist in preventing some of the silt moving down on the neighbor's property. And so that's why I added the recommendation that the county board consider requiring them to build a silt pond on their side. Because without that, if the county board agrees and goes ahead and adds that as a condition, then that's taking care of additional problems that are presently in place. And it has nothing to do with whether there's 4 or 5 lots or anything like that. It's the fact that the owner would have the right to do those 4 lots without any other approvals.
And so what you're saying is, let's deal with that issue that's on the table today because of that road that went in.
Well, I don't care about the road.
Don't care about that, okay.
It's just the fact that the recommendation, yes, it should be revoked, and they can proceed then with their 4 lots. But there's a request to the county board for them to consider requiring a retention pond be built on their property.
Fair enough, okay.
That's the only difference.
Okay.
I think that the information that was presented to us is very important in terms of the big picture of what's going on in this property. It's important to the overall or the eventual determination of how it's handled. That being said, that's not what's in front of us.
Right.
All that's in front of us is whether to revoke the special permit, and how that plays out after that process is outside of the purview of this commission.
That's
We
right.
don't have the wherewithal to impose additional.
Correct.
That, whether it should be happening and whether there are issues with NDEE and other things, that is outside of what we have jurisdiction, if you will.
Yep.
And so that, although relevant to the settling of what's going on here, that's not what we can take action on.
Correct.
All we can determine is whether or not the special permit itself can be revoked.
Yep.
Perfect, thank you.
You guys approved another plan for them earlier to have their road somewhere else. They chose to put that road over there, and then they chose not to do their impact hydraulic testing.
You know, I happen to be they.
And
I know that-
I'm sorry, gentlemen, we have already closed the public hearing, and unfortunately, from our procedural standpoints, we can't be receiving additional information at this point, and I apologize. I know that we do appreciate the additional information, but I'll stick to my point that those considerations are outside of the purview of what we can control here at the Planning Commission.
And you will have a chance to speak at the county commissioners hearing if you so choose.
I get a
Both,
letter in the mail.
both of you, because that's the next step in the process, is that this decision, whatever this body decides, then goes to the county board, and they are the ultimate deciders of this issue, which again is just the special permit revocation. So that will go there, and that's where that final process happens. And staff can certainly provide additional information about timing and how all of that works, and will certainly be available to both of you.
So I want to make a clarification that if we vote no on Dick's motion, then that would go back to the original motion? Or, like we
Well-
would have to put another motion forward without that?
I believe the way it was worded, we would have to put forth another motion with regard to the approval without Dick's addition, because of the,
Amend his.
yeah, it might be easier just to
We
yay
put-
or nay on that, and then we could take another motion.
Okay.
No one's running at us, so I'm assuming that makes sense.
I saw a yes from Steve.
We're good. So we've got a motion and a second. We're continuing discussion. Anyone else have anything they want to say? Okay, we will call a vote on Dick's motion, which includes the motion to revoke with the requirement of the.
No requirement.
Recommendation.
With the, I'm sorry, yes, with the recommendation that the county board consider a sediment pond. Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Recommendation, not a requirement. Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
No.
Motion carried 6-1.
Okay. So, we are moving forward now with the next item on the public hearing agenda.
The next item is 4.1, change of zone 22012 for a change of zone from R1 residential and B1 local business to B1 PUD plan unit development for a mixed-use redevelopment of up to 230 multifamily dwellings and 115,000 square feet of commercial floor area, or 150 hotel rooms and 50,000 square feet of commercial floor area, with waivers and adjustments to the zoning and subdivision ordinance on property generally located at South 27th Street and Highway 2. Planning Commission also should have received a staff memo dated May 24, 2022, identifying revisions to the conditions of approval. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of the site to be disclosed?
No. Brian?
Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning Department. The location that we're talking about is, depends on your time frame of reference. The old Chopco site, Russ's, Valentino's. We are at 27th and Highway 2 northeast of the intersection. Most folks just call it the old Chopco site. So what's shown here on the exhibit, this hatched line is delineating the boundary of the application you're considering today. The request is proposing a PUD, change of zone from R1 and B1 to B1 PUD, to allow up to 230 multifamily dwelling units and up to 115,000 square feet of commercial floor area, or in the alternate, 95,000 square feet of floor area and a 150 room hotel. I'm sorry, I forgot. Brian Will, Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. I always forget that. So we've been talking about this application actually with the applicant for quite some time now, probably probably more than a year. There have been several meetings. I know I've been to two that were online with the Country Club Neighborhood Association and the surrounding neighborhood association. So I know that there's been outreach to the neighbors, to the neighborhood. With this application, there are several waivers that are being requested. And maybe I'll just walk through those real quickly here, maybe some with a brief explanation. The first one, because the overall zoning is going to B1, so the underlying B1 zoning regulations apply unless otherwise amended by the PUD. And so these waivers or adjustments are those amendments to the B1 zoning district. So the first one is to allow dwellings on the first floor, which otherwise are prohibited in the B1. And maybe just quickly, I did provide an explanation there. You look around the city, the older B1, B3 commercial districts, they have a prohibition against residential on the first floor. The effort was to try to preserve those street level commercial uses. However, in this case, this location, this starting from scratch, ground up development, it's really not appropriate. So supportive of that waiver. The second one would allow on and off sale alcohol as a permitted use throughout the PUD. Generally, that's okay from staff standpoint. We did modify that to add in the condition that it's subject to a 100-foot separation from any existing residential footprint beyond the boundary. So we maintained some consistency with the existing special permits for on and off sale that otherwise would apply. Setbacks internally to the development are adjusted to 0, and that's typical of commercial developments these days. Adjusting parking for all uses internal to the development to 1 to 300. Again, that is typical what we find in the newer commercial developments around the city. Adjusting the minimum lot area for the B1 to 800 square feet. This is per dwelling unit, and so I gave some examples there of the R6, 7, and 8 districts, which are 1,100, 700, and 550 square feet, respectively. So it's in the range for that higher density multifamily residential that you'd find in the higher density residential districts. Increase the height from 40 feet to 65 feet. And so maybe getting this site plan out. So The request is to allow the apartments and hotels to go to 65 feet, although the use is limited to 55 feet, with an additional limitation of 35 feet within 105 feet of the north boundary. So what it's talking about is this is the area of the apartment building, so that or a hotel in that location would go to 65 feet. Other commercial buildings throughout the development would be limited to 55 feet. It's this area up in here where it is in proximity to existing residential and the apartment complex to the north. That the height limit equal to the R1 zoning district, which is 35 feet. So within 105 feet of that boundary, the height is further restricted to 35 feet, consistent with adjacent R1. Sign location and treating apartments commercial building, adjustment to the sign waiver. So what that does is, otherwise your apartment building would be treated as a residential use and wouldn't be allowed the same signs as the other commercial uses throughout the center. So that just doesn't seem appropriate. So the request here is to allow the apartment building to have a similar amount of signage as the other buildings in the development. The other one is pretty minor. It adjusts the spacing between freestanding signs along 27th Street from 50 feet to 40 feet. I want to also talk about Woods Boulevard here, which when you come into the center from the intersection, looks like a public street. Technically, it's really not. Public right-of-way ends at about this point here. The remainder of it was property acquired by the city and has been in ownership, the city's ownership, since about 1970. But it was used since then to provide access to both the apartments to the north and to the Bishop Heights Shopping Center. Due to the redevelopment, the city feels that it's probably time to divest that facility and let the people that are using it primarily take care of it. So one of the conditions is that this property be deeded to the developers of Bishop Heights. It is then to take care of and maintain. The portion that's in the right-of-way will still be the city's responsibility, but from that point on, it will be the responsibility of the Bishop Heights PUD development. There is a little piece of South 27th down in this location that needs to be vacated. That's also a requirement that that be done. There was considerable discussion too with the pedestrian and bicycle community, and those are some of the meetings that were also held and that I mentioned previously. Because as you look at the development, it fronts onto two trails, both the south and the east. And so it was a big concern of what is the relationship between this center and the trails? How's it going to present itself? How is it going to take advantage of the trail and make them really an amenity and make the center an amenity for the trail users? The next to last exhibit in your packet is a concept plan that was prepared by the applicant, and it contains elements to do just that, to make the interface between the two much easier and much more accessible for pedestrian and bicycle users on the trail. And so I've listed those in item number 7, and really what it talks about is limiting parking, creating access points, and limiting traffic adjacent to the trail. So on this exhibit, three of the four connections are shown. So that's here, here, and here. Parking and driving aisles are also restricted for Lot 5 adjacent to the trails, so there will be none there. Additionally, this portion of Lot 4 will also have no parking adjacent to the trail. What's shown here in the corner is, at this point, is the concept plan that Parks and Recreation hopes to build in the future. So the funding, just how and when that is all going to work is still hasn't been fully solved yet. But this shows the best guess at this point for the concept of what it would look like and how it would integrate into this development. So a lot of the concern that was raised by the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee have been addressed with these changes. Those have been incorporated in the staff report also as conditions of approval. And the last thing, let me just briefly touch on, because a lot has been, I've had a fair number of questions about traffic and the traffic study that has been submitted. So our traffic folks couldn't be here today due to illness, but let me just sort of generalize in my non-traffic engineer way of paraphrasing things. And this is an excerpt from the traffic study that was submitted by Olson Associates, and I believe they're here today and they can probably talk in more detail about this. So what we can generalize from this table here is that it's telling us that there will be an increase in AM peak, PM trip generation from the center. Will be a decrease in the PM. Overall, it's suggesting that there is going to be a total net decrease daily amount of trips to this site. Now, what I want to make sure is clear is that this is talking about what's being proposed here as part of this PUD as compared to what the center could be, what the current zoning and under full build out. Of course, today we're talking about a center that is virtually vacant. There is nothing there. But B1 with the floor area that that could be developed there, with the users potentially that could go there, this comparison between the two is based upon that. And so I asked our traffic folks to comment on the validity and what they found in the traffic study. And essentially what they said is that the study methodology is consistent with natural practice and appropriately minimizes the risks. So there were no major corrective comments coming out of our traffic folks relative to the traffic study. And so subject to the recommended conditions of approval at the end of the staff report, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Yeah.
Brian, would you put the one with the yellow tab back on the screen?
Which one?
Your plan, the plan of.
Oh, the overall plan? Yep.
Yeah. You had a yellow tab on it. I thought you put it right up above.
Yeah. Here's the landscape plan. I think it was nice.
What is the distance from Lot 8 to the neighbors on the east side?
This one here?
No, lot down where the apartments would be.
Oh, this lot here.
Yeah. What's the distance across to those neighbors in the
Well,
on
the
the
width
east?
of that right of way for the trail and the old railroad is 100 feet.
Okay.
So it's it's in excess of that. The exact number, I don't know, but it's well over 100 feet.
And would the same be true for Lot 4?
Lot 4 here, yeah, because the trail, right, fully extends
Right.
along the extent of it. And here, that, like I said, this is the old, this is the old plan. I expect it's going to look something more like this one, okay, where we have some revised pedestrian facilities here. But
Right.
again, that building is set back. Yeah, you know, there's at least a 20-foot setback there, so 120 feet plus.
And up on Lot 8, that has a 150-foot setback.
Talking about up here,
Yes.
okay?
To the residential. By putting the parking over on that east side, that gives them the 150 foot.
Yeah, anyway, and so in that part of the development, yeah, I have a graphic which shows there is a significant change in grade, and I mentioned that.
Right, and we have seen that picture
Oh, okay.
with the landscaping and the fence.
Yep, landscaping, fence, change in grade.
Right.
So there's significant change in elevation, as well as the height limitation in this area. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, I had a quick question about that. So I know Lot 8 had the height difference between Casera and Lot 8. Is that true for where the height for that building is, I think, max 35? For Lot 6, the request is up to 65. Is it the same?
No, there's not, that sort of differential doesn't exist here. Yeah, it's only at that northern end.
Brian, can you give us an estimation of, we've got those current apartment buildings in there now.
To the north.
How far is that easternmost apartment building away from the houses on the, you can just see it on the edge of your map. Yeah.
Well, let me make sure I'm seeing which one.
Nope. Other side. Yeah. How far is that from the houses on Terry Lane?
Oh, it's probably, I mean, it's probably about the same.
And those apartment buildings, how high are they?
Yeah, I think those are, I don't know. I mean, they're certainly not as tall as this. Maybe somebody else knows whether they're 2 or 3 story. I want to say they're 2 story, but they could be 3. But
I think they're 3.
Yeah,
Are they
have
3?
the-
Okay.
The mansard roof.
Are they? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the, 65 feet in height, what I note is that, that's becoming, here again, the comprehensive plan is encouraging us to use more efficient land, seeking, higher density where appropriate. We have approved 65 feet in height at least 3 other times now recently. 75 feet at Lexington, or 48th and Layton, 70 at 48th and Holdridge, Iron Ridge, 65 feet, Antelope Tower, 67, Chateau at Yankee Hill, 65. So, it's becoming more typical, but, that is consistent with better use of the property, more efficient use of the land, higher density.
So there's 2 different development plans, or there's the apartment development plan, and then there's the alternate plan.
They are requesting approval of an alternate, which would allow for a hotel and
The
some commercial.
hotel would supplant the apartments.
Yes.
That's lot 4.
No,
There's a lot of head shaking happening, so we may want
Okay.
to wait until.
Not the apartments.
I'm sorry. Is that what? Yes, it would not, sorry. The 230 dwelling units would remain regardless.
Okay,
The hotel would supplant some of the commercial area, but be in addition to that.
got it.
Sorry, I
And what would
misunderstood.
its height restriction be?
That one, it also would be able to go to
65.
65 feet.
Okay.
So that maximum height is for the apartment building and the hotel.
And the hotel?
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions for Brian?
I just want to recap that real quick. So if they decided to, commercial wasn't working out for them and they decided to go the hotel route, they would still have the apartments on lot 6 and the hotel would go maybe lot 4, lot 1, lot 2, somewhere in one of those. Okay.
Yeah.
Besides that kind of option that they have going on, they could say that their plans aren't working out or the market changes or something. They could say on lot 8 up on the north part, they don't have to put an office in there. They could put apartment building in there if they wanted to.
It designate, yeah, they're not limited to office because it does designate but it designates that lot for commercial uses, okay? So I think they're pretty much tied to that and the height limitation.
So it could be an office building, a strip mall,
Yeah,
okay?
Be limited to 35 feet.
but it'd be limited in height. The limitations that are there would apply regardless of, yeah, so it'd be the B1 uses, commercial, B1 uses.
But they wouldn't have to come back before the planning commission or to the planning director to get approval because it's within the
No.
PUD, so they can switch uses around like that
Yep,
without.
it would only be if there's some conflict with the waivers that have been requested, something is not otherwise allowed.
Okay. With the kind of the proposed changes to the trail, I just want to make sure the trail isn't going to be closed at any time during construction because they're just looking at adding entrances. So the actual trail itself would still be open the entire time.
Well, I can't make any representations to that. When Parks and Rec redoes that trailhead, yeah, I don't know. I don't have anybody here from Parks and Rec to answer that question.
Yep.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, Jake? Surprise, surprise.
Back there.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, JJ Yost, Planning and Facilities Manager for Parks and Recreation Department, 3131 O Street, Suite 300. There probably would be some temporary trail closures associated with construction, especially if we're realigning the trail as that concept shows, as at least an idea at this point, because it would be removal and reconstruction within the same area. So, very busy section of trail. We would try and minimize that disruption to the full extent possible, but I think ultimately there would be. But I will also say that that's an older section of trail that's coming up due for some renovation, some repair work anyway. So we'll try to make the best use of it.
So that would be more if the trailhead or when the trailhead is redesigned, not just, like adding these entrances to the trail.
Yeah, for the most part, if we were just leaving the trail as it is today and just making connections to it into the development, we wouldn't have to close the trail, other than there might be times when we're making that connection right at the trail and you've got during the day, but
Okay.
Hours perhaps.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for
Yeah.
Mr. Yost while
no,
he's here?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I noticed in the conditions of approval that I didn't seem to find where it specifically states that only that one area is limited to I think it's 35 feet. It just says, a general 65 feet, so I didn't know if we needed to add that in there somewhere.
Yeah, no, there's associated to development plan. that goes along with it. So the PUD has both the graphic and the text component. Some
Okay.
things are just, you get too many notes, it just gets too complicated on site plan. So the height and area regulations, section 3, talk about those height limitations.
Okay. I have some more questions about this lot 8. If it was developed by itself, how many parking stalls would it need?
Well, in 1 to 300,
And I couldn't quite find how many square foot that building was proposed at right now.
well, they're indicating 45,000 square feet.
Okay.
Okay, so 1 to 300, that would be
135.
Sounds right.
Okay. This is what happens when I don't have it on paper. I can't find those little details. I think that's it for right now.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Nope, I'm
Go ahead.
Okay, so I want to point out, I did send Planning Commission a corrected memo. I corrected some of my numbers there in a couple locations throughout the staff report. That is the total amount of commercial floor area being requested. It's 115,000 square feet, not 70 as I had stated. Also, I made a couple changes to 2 of the conditions of approval. 1.6, I essentially added 2 words. And 1.8, we came to an agreement with the owners, the developer, as far as what we were talking about relative to the location of bike racks or accommodating that. And so that specific language is then added. So corrected a couple paragraphs. My recommended conditions of approval would be as amended by this memo here. So, that's all.
Any other questions for Brian right now? Thank you.
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. If we can get up on the viewer here, there was a request for what did the apartments look like next door. So this is the existing Country Club apartments. They have garden level, so there are 3 levels of apartments, but the height is probably closer to 2.5 stories effectively.
Great, thank you. Testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski, appearing today on behalf of the applicants and developers. I'm going high-tech today and trying PowerPoint, so I would ask for just a little bit of extra time. We've got quite a few details to go through. Maybe some of what we give in our presentation will help answer some of those questions that you have. We are in front of you today for the planned unit development. I know you've seen my partner up here at least once or twice talking about blight and talking about a redevelopment plan amendment for this project, but we're focused today really on the change of zone that we're asking for in the land use components. We are continuing to work, though, with the city on the redevelopment agreement. So some of the information I give you today would be a crossover kind of between the PUD and the redevelopment agreement, but I think it gives you maybe the bigger scope and bigger picture of what's going on out here. We do have 3 developers who are involved in this project. I think they've been introduced to you before, but Redevelopment is working on the southern portion of the site. They're a commercial developer. They're familiar to us because they've worked on the South Point Pavilions development here in Lincoln and recently the Shields expansion. They've got a lot of experience in mixed-use developments. EPC Real Estate Group is the group that's going to be working on the apartments. With us here today is Terry O'Leary with EPC, so if we have any questions at the end specifically relating to the apartments, Terry will be able to help us. They're headquartered out of that Kansas City area. And then on the northern piece, we have White Development working on that component. That's Tom White and Zach White, local developers who've been around here for probably, more than 40 years, Tom? Projects such as Waterford Estates, Wilderness Ridge, you've seen them around town too. So we think with the three developers together bring a lot of really good synergy to the development of this site and maximizing the potential for it. As Brian indicated, we all know where this site is located. It's 97% vacant today. We've got outdated and non-efficient buildings and very little pedestrian experience. So that's why we're bringing it forward not only as a PUD, but also as a redevelopment project. It's already been declared blighted and substandard by the City Council. And obviously we already have a redevelopment plan amendment that'll be headed to City Council here in the next few weeks. The vision to create a revitalized pedestrian-oriented neighborhood, providing a mix of amenities for the nearby residents. We'll be demolishing the former Shopco building, the US Bank building, and also that 2711 Kuchera Drive. Construction of a new 5-story, 230-unit higher-end multifamily building. We'll be adding a mix of commercial uses. We'd like to see a really healthy mix, restaurants, retail, office, located really throughout the remainder of the site. We'll be adding new connections to the Rock Island Trail and to the Basalis Trail, which is going to help with that connectivity. And that existing Arby's is within the PUD, but we're not really changing the site plan on it, but there are renovations planned for that site. And then the Wells Fargo Bank building is not part of the PUD, and so it will remain the same. So that kind of shows you a little bit of where each of the developers' parcels are located. So let's talk just a little bit more about each specific one. So the red site plan for the southern portion of the site would allow a mix of up to 70,000 square feet of commercial uses. If they did do the hotel use, then they would reduce the amount of commercial square footage on the site. Again, relocated connections to both Rock Island Trail and a new connection to the Helen Busalis Trail to the south. And again, the Arby's will be renovated. On the EPC site, construction of that new 5-story apartment building and new connections to the Rock Island Trail from this site. Got a couple renderings of the buildings. This concept looks both south and kind of the west elevation. And then this one gives you the elevation from the east side and the south side. It's a really nice looking product. On the white site plan, we've shown right here a couple concepts that they may have. We'll be demolishing the existing bank building, which has become pretty dysfunctional and obsolete. Up to 45,000 square feet of office and commercial buildings. Right now they're looking at potentially one larger building or two smaller buildings. There would be no vehicular access to this site from Kuchera Drive. There is not currently and will not be in the future. And as Brian mentioned, they'll maintain that height restriction on the north, 105 feet from Kuchera Drive to that same residential height limit of 35 feet. Just a couple renderings if they decided to go with the one building. And then another concept showing the two buildings. Okay, and I've put in a copy of the landscape plan. And the landscape plan does show some of those adjustments to the site plan that Brian talked about with respect to the trail along the east side. But I want to just walk around that just because I think it helps give you a better perspective of orientation to the neighbors. And I can make the mouse work on my computer, but not on your screen. So we'll just walk it around from north and go directions. So on the north part of the site, I'm going to have another exhibit for you, but it does show up along Kuchera Drive, there's going to be some extensive landscaping there. And we do have a difference in height elevation, which really decreases the impact that commercial development will have on the residential neighborhood to the north. And then if you go to the east part of the site that's adjacent to that Rock Island Trail. If you kind of start at the north, you can see there's a great big mass of green there. Well, that's existing trees. There's really a lot of existing trees that are on both the east and the west side of the trail through that northern section, which really provides almost, I'm not going to say 100% screen, but a significant screen to both the residences on the east side and then the apartment buildings that will be located on the west side, which is why they've allowed the parking to be along that east side on the apartments, because it will be screened from the existing vegetation on the trail. And then as you go further to the south, there's again good vegetation on the east side of the trail, adjacent to the residential, but not so much on the west side of the trail, which would kind of be screening it from those commercial buildings. So that's where the planning staff condition is requested that we limit parking along that area to only about half of that area. We've also going to be adding some landscape screening along there to help sort of minimize that. And then that landscape screening will continue clear down to the south and along that new building on the south side. Again, the new condition requires that we can't have a drive-through on the south or the east side of that building and no parking along the trail for that building. So here's just that exhibit, and you may have seen it before with Kent, that kind of shows that height differential on Kuchera. Between Kuchera Drive and Woods Boulevard, there's almost like a 10-foot drop in elevation. So we're going to take advantage of that with a retaining wall on that north side and provide some real separation. And along with the landscaping, that'll provide a really nice screening along there. I think Brian already kind of hit the traffic, and he actually showed you that same chart. So I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about the trails and the trail connectivity, because that was a huge issue for the neighbors and for our trail advocates. So we do, have the adjacency of both the Rock Island Trail and then the Busalis Trail. As Brian mentioned, that Rock Island Trail has a nice wide 100-foot corridor with a lot of vegetation. This is just an example of kind of on the north side of the trail as it's adjacent to the apartment site. You've got good vegetation on both the east and the west. And that would be looking to the east to the residential area. And again, to the east to the residential area as you go a little bit further south on the site. So let's walk through just some of these trail enhancements that are added sort of between the PUD. Some of them are shown on the PUD, some of them will be addressed in a little more detail in the redevelopment agreement. But you don't get to see the redevelopment agreement, so I thought I'd show it to you today. We have 4 trail access points. So the trail access point on the north will be along the north side of the apartments. It's going to provide a nice sidewalk connection all the way over to 27th Street, where we have the stoplight at the lighted intersection there. Also provides a connection to that trail that runs north into that Bishop Heights neighborhood. Those are all shown in red there on that map. We have a trail connection in the middle that will veer off both to the south into the commercial and again into the apartments. Another connection down, we call it southeast, which will eventually kind of connect into that new trailhead improvement project that Parks is planning. And then we've got one more connection over in kind of the southwest corner of the site, and that's going to provide some access to where we will have some vehicular parking for trail. We're going to be placing bike racks at the entry points. That's a condition that Brian modified in his staff report. We'll be screening the trash dumpsters from the trail. Basically improving the aesthetics so we don't just have the backs of buildings located along there. And that's kind of an example of the view that you would have of the apartments. We'll be professionally maintaining berms that we have along the trail between our commercial uses. This is kind of just a cross-section that maybe explains what I talked about, especially up against the apartment area. That Rock Island Trail sets at a little bit lower elevation and then is significantly screened by existing trees that are located on both sides of the trail. So the actual view from the trail to the apartments is going to be limited, and parking from the parking lot there. Improving safety of the trail. Really I think two areas that parks have that they want to look at improving, and that is that trailhead kind of down here at the east where those two trails connect. And then also to the west where we have some parking and uses pretty close to the trail. You'll see that we're going to be pulling the parking back a little bit, putting some additional screening on that south side. And then this plan shows the new trailhead improvements and kind of reconfiguration that's being proposed by the Parks Department. Be adding 10 available trailhead parking stalls over there toward the southwest, which is kind of why we've got that connection to the trail right from those parking stalls. Be a proposed drinking fountain. Planning to remove the overhead power lines along down through there, which would be great amenity for them and the commercial and residential. And then the other trailhead amenities, I really am summarizing up by just giving you a glimpse of kind of what Parks has put out as a conceptual plan for trailhead improvements. So a lot of different components to, that. I'm sure some of that will be dealt with a little more detail in the redevelopment agreement and Parks and their own funding. And then kind of finally, the developers committed to encouraging their tenants, owners to add patios and decks to take advantage of the location to the trail. I think we need to remember that we have to maintain some flexibility for those users. There have been some requests to orient 100% to the trail, but that's just really not realistic if we want to have users who can compete and succeed in today's marketplace. When you do the comparison, these are highly used trails in Lincoln, but if you compare the trips on the trail compared to just the vehicular trips that go by here, trail's about 4% of the overall traffic. So while we want to orient and take advantage of it, that can't be the sole focus, of the development. We still have to orient to some of our vehicular users, which are going to help this development succeed. Brian mentioned we've had significant neighborhood outreach on the project, 2 Zoom presentations to neighbors in the immediate area. Then did another presentation to the Country Club Neighborhood Board of Directors and other interested neighbors. Met with neighborhood representatives of Bishop Square. He met with the Pedestrian and Trail Advisory Committee. And then we've responded, obviously, to numerous emails and phone calls from interested parties. Today, we're requesting your approval of the PUD. We first have to thank city staff. As Brian mentioned, this has been a long project, but there's a lot of components to it, and everybody wants to make sure we do this right. It's an important project for our community. But we have been able to reach a lot of compromises that allow us to balance some of that vehicular access that we need with trying to minimize impact to the trail also. The PUD is in conformance with and support the goals and policies of the 2050 Comprehensive Plan. There's a lot more items than this listed in Brian's staff report, but encourage redeveloping underutilized commercial centers, helping meet that 25% goal for residential in infill that we have in the comp plan, and then supporting complete neighborhoods in redeveloping areas. This allows us to help this whole area be a complete neighborhood by adding services back here. Planning department's recommended conditional approval, including all the requested waivers with an adjustment on the alcohol one. All the conditions of approval per Brian's revised staff report are acceptable to the developer. We have no requested amendments to the conditions. So that's a real testament to being able to work through a lot of this with staff and everybody, looking at this from a realistic standpoint of what we need to make it successful for both the private sector and for the community. I think at this stage, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I forgot to mention Aaron Bright. Aaron's here from Olson Associates too, and so he's been the engineer on the project. And so all of these gentlemen would be available to answer questions too.
Okay, questions for Danae?
When we're looking at parking overall for the site, Is there more provided than necessary, or how are you guys sitting with that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tracy. We will definitely meet the minimum requirement of the 1 per 300. But we do also need to be responsive to what the actual users need. So for example, if you have a restaurant that comes in, they want to see that in their proximity, there's, 1 or like 10 per 1,000, almost 1 per 100 square feet. And so we're going to need to be able to provide that. So if you look at the overall site plan, probably with the amount of square footage we show, we have more parking than what would be required, but that's to accommodate some of those users that will require more parking.
For the apartment complex, I can't remember, it might have said this. There's some garages.
Yes.
And then is the other just surface parking lot?
Surface and then some underground too, Terry?
Underground, detached garages, carports, and surface.
Yeah, we got a mixture.
Okay. I think that's really all my questions for.
It does look like you mentioned that one of the outreach that you had was in the neighborhood, and in particular with the Country Club Neighborhood Association. We received a letter from the Country Club Neighborhood Association recently, and there's lots of things in there. In particular, they expressed some dismay about the traffic study, and concern that they weren't quite sure that they understood all of the detail that was presented in that study and the decrease at numbers at different times of the day. I guess I wanted to give you an opportunity perhaps to speak a little bit to the study, and obviously we had the chart, but just a little bit more information about how that was conducted and the information that came from it.
Well, I'll maybe let Aaron hit that one a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron Bright with Olson, 601 P Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm a civil engineer, but not a traffic engineer, so I'll do my best to paraphrase and summarize. So Shane King from Olson was the traffic engineer of record, and his involvement kind of was from the initial stages of the project as well. So he's been kind of involved with the traffic study and different chip generation counts from a year's ago time. The basis for the study, as typical for most studies, is first to kind of follow the City of Lincoln's access management policy and their expectations and requirements there, and then also to follow along with ITE, trip generation national standards. And so for the purpose of the traffic study, really that was Shane's goal and intent, was he has to analyze the proposed uses compared to something. It's not representative to compare the proposed uses out here versus what's actually kind of occurring on a daily basis right here because of the condition of the development right now. However, it was appropriate, and he felt, and I believe LTU staff supports that assumption, as Brian Will had suggested, that you could compare that to what the development in its current condition, well, a better condition than was currently, the total square footage that was out there at some point in time, and the trips and the generation that would have been resulted from there. So that was kind of the basis of understanding and the basis of the formula that was evaluated with the traffic study. It was reviewed with LTU staff over the period of time over this development plan, and so I think we've all felt that that was appropriate with the summaries and conclusions that it came to.
Great. That's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions along those
Yeah,
lines?
One of in that same letter, they questioned whether you'd taken into account the South Beltway and the reduction of traffic on Highway 2. And based upon what you've just said, that wasn't even accounted for.
I'd have to go back and look. There was at least an acknowledgement from the traffic study that there would be a reduction. Let me not say that the traffic study acknowledged it. There was at least an acknowledgement between LTU staff and Shane King as a traffic engineer that the trip truck traffic on Highway 2 would certainly go down. I believe LTU, and I can't remember the exact percentage of reduction, LTU is kind of operating with an assumed, reduction of total truck traffic now.
And that's what we had assumed in the South Beltway. That was kind of included for reference. I don't know that it specifically made an impact or actually made it into the findings of the traffic study. I think it's certainly acknowledged in there, but not.
Yeah, I had it in my notes that LTU had suggested that the truck traffic could reduce a third to up between a third and 50% of truck traffic on Highway 2 from the Beltway. So in some of the Beltway presumptions.
But I think for the most part, we were using existing counts
Right.
for Highway 2 traffic and
Okay.
not an assumption of that much of a reduction.
That's my understanding too.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll take testimony in support of this application. Is there any testimony in support? Is there any neutral testimony? Yes, please, come forward. Either one. Name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Kim Hachia. It's spelled HachiyA. I live at 3000 Cuchero Drive. I don't know if I'm exactly neutral, but I do kind of oppose the taking of the house at 2711 and the parking and the green space lot next to it. I don't see the point of that. It's a perfectly good house. To say that it's abandoned is a little disingenuous because it was purchased to abandon. I am glad that that there is redevelopment going because that is an eyesore for our neighborhood. I sometimes feel, however, that we're putting 20 pounds of potatoes in a 10-pound sack. And so I'm a little nervous about the scope and size of this project. And I do think it will kind of negatively affect the amount of traffic that will be coming up and down 27th Street, which is already kind of a cluster. And, but I'm in favor of redevelopment, but I'm just not sure that this is, I think it's just, the scope is excessive. So anyway, thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else neutral? We'll move to testimony in opposition. I know we have one online. Is there anyone in the room in opposition? Seeing none, we can go to the online testimony. Hello, if you can hear me. Okay, please state your name and record, or name and address for the record, please.
James Morel, Morel. I'm the property owner of 4121 Terry Lane. And then that property, my property, is probably my concern is the proposed increase of the 230 unit Lot 6 building at 65 feet. I guess my property is probably the closest to the building, my backyard, to the southeast corner of the building. And that is my main objection in terms of visually seeing it. I'm definitely against increasing the maximum height from the 40 foot to 65 foot. I think it should be maintained at 35 feet, sort of like the Cuchera Drive has requested overall. Overall, the height increase, in my opinion, would have a detrimental impact on the Terry Lane homes, all of the homes, my neighbors, the views, the privacy, and also the real estate value in terms of having this looming property there overall. I think the Lot 6 building is proposed so close to the property line, I think it would be very visible from my property. The existing trees and bushes at that location, I think would do very little to hide the building itself at 65 feet. I've looked at the presentation and the plans that has this schematic section through, and I think that's all it is. It doesn't go beyond the trees, and I think the trees are actually shown pretty high. I guess overall, I would like more consideration for the impact on the Terry Lane and also the Mary Circle homes. The house is built My property was built in the early 60s, and it was the first house to be built on Terry Lane, I'm told. That's only 60 years old. I like to preserve that neighborhood as much as possible. Again, my concern is the visibility of that building and then the privacy impact on my properties.
Do you have anything else? Thank you very much, Mr. Merle.
That's pretty much it. And even my daughter, who's going to take over the property, she says, well, it's 100 feet away, 150, 25 feet away. I said, well, with the height of 65 feet, that's probably the biggest and tallest construction within miles overall. And I related it to, let's say, everyone knows this, a football. Everyone knows football. A football field is 150 feet wide. So you're standing on the sidelines looking across, and then we're going to construct 65 feet, 6 stories of viewing stands. So in terms of just the impact of that, standing on one side looking across at 65 feet up, even if we put trees in the middle, which are 25 feet tall, 30 feet tall, it's still the visibility of it and the impact. And that is my major objection. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mr. Merle? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, one more quick ask, if there's any other testimony in opposition. Are there any other staff questions?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, come on up, Brian.
I was trying to find it here, but you might know off the top of your head. So they're asking for a waiver to go to 65, but the regular standard would be 55. So it would just be 10 additional feet in that area.
You mean as compared to the B? No, what would apply is the requirement of the B1 district, which I think is 40 feet.
40, okay.
Yes, so they're asking to increase it up to 65, but then there's limits, 55 and then 35 when you're way up close in the north. Okay, so 40 would be the regulatory requirement for the B1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have one clarifying question. So on lot 6, I'm trying to understand the setback here. So it's 100 foot setback from?
Well, it depends on what we're talking about. Setback from, I mean, if we're talking about, I think I broke it. Okay.
I'm sorry, lot 8. I'm sorry. So the northern part.
Oh.
And the reason why I'm asking is I saw in one of the drawings potential of 2 buildings. And so I thought there was a
yes,
setback.
they have a concept 1 or could do potentially 2. Okay.
So based on the site plan and the recommendation, the setback from Kuchera is how much?
There's a perimeter setback along Kuchera that is 30 feet, and then there's a setback along the existing residential dwelling of 10 feet. Okay, so those are setbacks from property lines. Okay, from there then they are showing that they intend to have parking in that area. But then in that area, 105 feet back from those property lines, there's a limitation on height.
So it's 100 feet for height, not necessarily to.
Yes, so
Okay,
the setback, yes, of 105 feet from those lot lines. So if you're within that area, you're limited to the R1 maximum height of 35 feet. Okay, so I mean, you could build something up there, but you're limited to what the R1, which is the adjacent dwellings, et cetera, what they have. You're limited in height to what the 35 feet is applicable to them as well.
Other questions for staff? Okay, thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Applicant rebuttal?
to low-tech. Can't quite get it all, and so I'll do it from this side so far. So this is just to kind of address the height of the apartment building. So this is an elevation that's been prepared for the apartment building. And we'd be looking toward the trail. So this would be an existing residential house. We've got kind of the trail that dips down a little bit in here with the existing vegetation. Actually, because of the elevation of the site, somebody asked Brian the question of is there site elevation difference on the site south of Woods Boulevard? And there is with respect to the construction of the apartment building. So I don't think I'm gonna be able to blow it up big enough, but from the actual elevation of the grade on the east side of the apartment building, you're closer to 52 feet above the grade. If you're looking at it from, the neighbors on the west side looking to the east, we're over 60 feet on this side. So you can kind of see there's a step down in the actual elevation. So about 52 feet on that east side. Again, you've got the mature trees and landscaping in there. And that just the distance and the separation, which we think minimizes that impact. I do want to address maybe that lot on Kuchera Drive also, because I did see that in the neighborhood letter that we just saw in the neighborhood letter today. So I think the lot they're talking about is the lot right there. When we're coming in and trying to redevelop a site, having that and being able to kind of square off the site is really important for being able to lay it out efficiently and have the parking. This is kind of the specific landscaping plan for the white property. And it shows, Commissioner Ball, a little more easily that kind of area that will be limited in height. So you're right, when we have a I think our site plan with the two buildings does have one of the buildings going up into that area, but that would just be then a lower story building and stay within that 35 feet height. But in essence, you can see how by just the addition of that one lot just makes the layout on the lot a lot better. There was already, the existing bank building already had frontage on Kuchera. At this point in time, that bank building is obsolete and needs to be demolished, so the use on the site needs to be changed. And when you're coming at it from a redevelopment perspective, when you're raising an existing building, you're trying to look at how you can do it most efficient and effectively. And then I'll just remind you of that exhibit where, with the grade differential, there'll be a fence added, there'll be landscaping and additional trees added that we're trying to minimize the impact that the development on that site will have on the rest of the, Kuchera neighborhood. I guess the other question that came up is really just with respect to traffic. And, I think a lot of the traffic issues out here were decided 20 and 30 years ago when the comp plan was suggesting that, 27th Street should be widened to accommodate more traffic. And the neighbors were heard, and the city agreed that we won't widen 27th Street. However, we still have a growing community which continues to put pressure, on that street, and that's just a situation we're going to have to live with when we have only a 3-lane street going through there. So I think what we've shown in the traffic study is, the site is zone B1, could be developed as B1. If you look at it and you compare, we are not adding additional traffic beyond, what the development would have had back when it was up and going. It will be an increase in traffic because it's not up and going right now, but it will not be overall an increase. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Other questions for Danae?
Danae, kind of the reason why I was asking about parking is, one alternative that I could easily come up with myself on that lot 8 is instead of, tearing down the residential house to create parking is, I would be open to, reducing the parking for that section and to leave the house standing. And
Right.
what are your,
And the problem of it is you just can't go too low because then it's really not a functional, it's just not a functional site. And even though we say that 1 to 300, that we're kind of averaging out over a multitude of uses on that entire development. And mostly people who are coming to that little area north of Woods are going to park there. So we probably have to be a little more cognizant up there of what the actual needs are for the uses that you have. So the 1 per 300 may work great if it's all office. If we get a little coffee shop on the first floor of the office, then 1 to 300 is not going to work. So that's our challenge there, Tracy.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
second core?
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
I would move that we approve the change of zone 22012.
Second, Ball.
Discussion.
It makes a great deal of sense to bring a PUD in on this property, which allows more flexibility as they move forward on things that they can do. I'm not as concerned about the 65-foot height with the change of grade that happens in that lot. That reduces the visualization problem for some of the neighbors on Terry Lane. And those trees are going to continue to get taller. So I'm acceptable of that height change. They've got a good basic plan. Obviously, with the PUD, I'm sure we're going to see some changes as they determine what tenants want to come there and rent from them in the retail or office areas. But I think it's a great project to get a good location back in existence and paying taxes to the city.
I concur with my fellow commissioner. I'll be supporting this project. I think they've done a great job with their exhibits, presenting those height challenges for the neighborhoods to understand. And it does look like they're very sensitive to the different distances as they move through, very supportive of some of the needs that we've been pushing in our city area with the bike trails and addressing those items. And again, putting this back into a functioning site in the city of Lincoln with the changes we'll be seeing on Highway 2's traffic, it's very exciting to see.
Yeah.
I would be agreeing with my commissioners as well. Feels like we've seen this every other hearing. But I do appreciate the clarity, the thoughtfulness of the exhibits, the outreach to the community, and sort of what's going to be developed here. Right? I think it's pretty exciting for the area. And I too understand the traffic and the concern about it, especially dropping my daughter off and going to O Street to office. I navigate my way through there in the morning, so understand the contention, but it's something that we can't put on the developers for that. So I will be supporting this.
I want to just thank the developers for the extensive neighborhood outreach that you guys have done. That really makes a difference when you guys come forward to us. And some of the concessions or the compromises that you've made, I really appreciate that. It is hard with the traffic and the pinch point there. And I think, Danae, you made a good point, where a long time ago this was decided, to keep this, minimal lanes there. And so the neighborhood has to decide, do they want more lanes or, And if they've changed their mind, then they need to let all of us know, which alternative they prefer. But I think this is a good project, and it'll be a big change for the neighborhood to have something, going on there instead of just having it vacant, and sometimes that's hard. But I think it's a good plan.
I agree. I will also support this change of zone. It really checks a lot of boxes with regard to our comprehensive plan. Focus on complete neighborhoods, focuses on infill. It's an exciting project that will bring vibrancy to an area of our community that has been in need. We'll hope that the change won't be too hard on the neighborhood as it moves forward, and appreciate everyone's involvement in that process. Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next public hearing item is item 4.2, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 22006, to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lincoln Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, a proposed amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan to revise the Gold's Building redevelopment project for redevelopment and rehabilitation of the original Gold and Company store, along with creation of an enhanced employment area on property generally located at 1023 and 1033 O Streets between 10th and 11th and N and O Streets. Is there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
No. Andrew?
Thank you. Andrew Thera, 555 South 10th Street. Urban Development's the applicant for this, so we're just going to hand it off to them, but we'll be available for questions at the end.
Thank you.
Hello, Hallie Salem, Urban Development Department, 555 South 10th Street, Suite 205. I'm here today to talk about the amendment to the Lincoln Center redevelopment plan for the Gold's redevelopment project phase 1. And we're asking you today to find it in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The project before you was identified in the 2018 Downtown Lincoln Master Plan as part of a couple catalyst projects, both the O Street Revitalization Project, otherwise called the Front Door to Downtown, or what we're now calling the Downtown Corridors Project, and then also for the 11th Street Greenway Project, both the facade for the phase 1 project contributes to both, and then an active use would also support both of those projects. The phase 1 project includes the redevelopment of the Gold's Building, condominium unit 1, generally located at 1033 O Street, and the adjacent parcel at 1023 O Street. And it's proposing the redevelopment of the six-story building that's approximately 122,000 square feet to be rehabilitated and converted into a hotel. And then first floor, approximately 6,000 square feet of retail on that first floor or restaurant. And then as well as underground parking underneath that site. And then the building at 1023 O Street would be demolished. It would allow windows to be installed on that west facade. And then the developer has requested public funding for the project related to the public improvements, site acquisition and preparation, interior demolition of the six-story building, minor demolition, as well as the demolition of the 1023 building, utility and other right-of-way improvements related to O Street and 11th Street streetscape, and other right-of-way improvements, facade and historic improvements, energy efficiency enhancements, costs associated with the relocation of the StarTran, temporary and or permanent, and would also help, I should mention, with that goal also in the downtown master plan of developing the new transit center. And then other public improvements allowed under the law. This is actually the second plan amendment for Golds that you've seen. This will replace that plan amendment that was previously proposing residential at the site and remove that from the existing plan. And let's see, the project has been to Historic Preservation Commission 3 times now. The last meeting on April 21st, the Historic Preservation Commission, according to Andrew's staff report, voted 4-1 to recommend support for the phase 1 of the project. There was also discussion about the phase 2 of the project, and some members expressed concern about demolishing the south half of the block without a redevelopment plan in place for that piece of it. So with that, the developer is here and their attorney, and you can ask questions of me now or wait until there's additional information provided.
Just to be clear, you're the applicant. So.
We're the applicant for the Urban Development Department.
Okay, and so do you wish the developer to formally testify or just be available for questions?
The developer can come up and testify.
Great. Dick?
This has nothing to do with conformance with the comp plan, but with it being historic preservation, there will not be any windows on the south side then?
Yes, there will be windows on the south side as well.
Okay, the previous plan
was
prohibited to have windows on the south side.
The previous plan maintained the 4-story structure and also planned to have windows on that 4-story structure.
Got it.
But could not receive historic tax credits if they did so. So their financing was not,
right.
They were not able to finance the project.
By taking down the 4-story, that removed that problem.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And they're not seeking historic tax credits on this project.
And the 4-story would be the south part of the?
The 4-story is the south part of the additions to the original 1924 construction.
So I have questions more about the taxing and the Community Redevelopment Authority, so I don't know if you feel comfortable answering those.
Sure.
Okay. So would the Community Redevelopment Authority be the city in this case?
So it's a little confusing, and I might defer to Tim C. on that question, but the city acts as the redevelopment authority through city council. And the Urban Development Department provides the staffing for that redevelopment authority, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
So when it talks about applying this occupation tax, that would be only to the businesses inside this building. Is that correct?
Yeah, Tim C. City Law Department.
555 South 10th.
555 South 10th, Suite 300, if you want to get specific. The EA is mentioned in this redevelopment plan amendment as a placeholder, I think is how I would say it. So in other words, that is not necessarily part of the discussion today. It is certainly a tool that is out there. It's mentioned in the redevelopment law, and it has to be included in redevelopment plans before they go forward. But I think today's purpose is really to just talk about the comprehensive plan and how this works with that as a land use. Certainly, EEA is one of those topics that catches everyone's attention, and there would have to be a lot more details that come forward, but that's really something that's approved by the city council when it gets to them.
So the developer is basically just keeping their options open. They could use TIF and the EA together.
Yes, though. So in blighted and substandard areas, the TIF and the EEA are allowed to work together, so the taxes generated through the occupation tax that's created through the enhanced employment area are allowed to be used for anything that TIF would otherwise be allowed to be used for.
For my own peace of mind, am I correct when I'm thinking of like examples of other EAs that have been done? Would that be something like Shields down in South Point?
So yes, Shields, or the parking garage does employ an enhanced employment area. That's not a blighted and substandard area, so it actually uses a different part of the statute. The other enhanced employment areas that I think have been improved, there was one for 9th and O Street for part of the original project at that location that didn't come into effect, and then there was one approved, I believe, for the Great American Sports Park. Obviously, that project wasn't completed as well, but I think those are the 3 examples in Lincoln where we have previously approved enhanced employment areas.
And as Tim said, we'd be going back to City Council for approval of both the use of TIF in a redevelopment agreement and the EEA as part of an ordinance.
And so I'm gonna ask again, just because I'm not sure if this part was answered. If the EA went through, the taxes, like the 2% or whatever that they decide to do, would only be imposed, it wouldn't be citywide, it would just be imposed on that building.
Correct. It would just be part of this project. It would not be a citywide sales tax or anything like that.
Just in the project area, so it shows the phase 1 for the project area. It could include other project areas, but it would need to be approved.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Additional questions?
I have another one for Hallie.
Mm-hmm.
How long has it been since the south portion of this building has had some tenants?
That's a good question. The last I knew, it was probably sometime in 2020, but I'm not certain of that. I know that there were some state of Nebraska staff that moved from one portion of the building to another portion of the building because of some of the issues in that south half.
And I'm pretty sure that I've got this right, but again, I just want to clarify. At this point in time, for phase 1, they're only going to tear down the 1023 building, not the southern half of the 1033 building.
Phase 1, funding for phase 1 is only including demolition of the 1023 building. However, in order to install the walls on the south half, or the southern facade of the 6-story building, that 4-story building would need to be removed.
Okay, so it would include removal of that in
So
this.
the 4-story building is not included in the project area, nor for funding, but it would need to include demolition to carry out what they are talking about.
This is sort of related, but not. So the building right next to 1023, where Aging Partners is at, Aging Partners is in there now, but I understand that they're gonna be moving to the VA campus. So is the city gonna keep that building? Are they gonna?
The city is gonna surplus that building.
Okay. So the development of this could maybe have some effect on that.
Yes.
As well. Okay.
To the good or detriment, depending on how you look at it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Should we bring the developer up at this time?
Good afternoon. Andrew Willis, Klein Williams, 233 South 13th Street in Lincoln. I apologize. We had the development team had a meeting at 3 o'clock, so we almost made it, and then they had to leave. So, but I should be able to answer all your questions. To start off, I kind of want to take one step back because it's already been brought up a couple times. So this, we've already had one plan amendment for an attempt to redevelop the Golds building. There's been a couple attempts to redevelop the Golds building. It's been a challenge for developers.
I was gonna make a joke that we may not see this every other hearing, but maybe every
other year. Yeah, that's about right. And the last and the plan that was approved and was approved, but then fell through at the financing stage. The previous iteration of this, it was due to the historic preservation, the windows on the south side of that 4-story building, and and so the project ended up not being able, they just couldn't do anything with it. The owner at that time was quoted in the Journal Star back in July of 2021 saying, well, I'm just going to demo the building and put a parking lot in because I can't do anything with it. We can't redevelop it. So post that comment and sort of, statement, it was sold to the current owners, this current development team. And they've looked at a lot of what they can do, ways to redevelop this, and the best plan, what they've came up with is historic preservation of the original 6-story tower. That's phase 1, and that's ultimately all that's included in this is phase 1, and that's we're calling it phase 1. But it's the original 1926 6-story tower, but that 4-story addition to the south. Again, not part of what we're talking about today, but that would be demoed, and it was really the only way to make it work functionally to preserve the original 6-story tower. What that does is that does allow windows on the south side. Without windows, you can't have a hotel, and that was the best use. And so, ideally, hopefully, we'll it's called phase 1. Hopefully there's going to be a phase 2 coming, but really that's from a big picture standpoint, that's how it got to what's before you. There was challenges in the bigger process, and this was the way to redevelop the Gold's building and at least the original tower. It has been in front of historic preservation several times. As was stated, obviously they were happy with the preservation itself of the tower. They have concerns over the demolition, which understandable, but that was the only way, in our minds, that was the only way to preserve the phase 1, the original tower. So, and again, this would be about a 110-room hotel, retail restaurant space on the first floor. Really, the idea would be to engage both the 11th Street corridor plan, the O Street, just streetscapes with a retail restaurant space, and then have the hotel above it. There would be underground parking that would help support the hotel that's needed there. All in all, it's about a $24 million investment in this tower. I've got a couple pictures to show you. Now, I guess when you look at them, it's going to look like there's not much change because that's the purpose here. We're historic preservation. We're preserving the existing building. So it really will. The goal is to keep that tower. It will take some work, some additional work on the exterior facade, but the goal is to maintain from that first story what you see. Now this, we'll show you a rendering because again, it's no surprise. I mean, that would be hotel, and you do see what would be some space there. Again, that's how we the south side it's demoed, and that's how this works. But again, that's not actually part of what we see before us today. There's no funding for that. That's necessary, but not part of it of this redevelopment plan. Just one more picture again. Again, there's not much. They look very similar because that's the purpose here. A couple other things I would add. It's already just to reiterate what was already said. The EEA is in here because in order to have potentially use the enhanced and preliminary occupation tax, it needs to be part of this redevelopment plan. Even the redevelopment plan states that this, if it's engaged, if it's activated, it would be with a phase 2. So we don't know for sure, but without putting it in here, we just need to preserve that opportunity in here. Ultimately, there'd be a lot more that would need to be done. The occupation tax ordinance would have to be passed by a city council. So really, I think calling it a placeholder is probably accurate. It needs to be in here so that we can pursue it, and hopefully it will be helpful and make it work. But as of now, it doesn't do anything else other than keep that option open. I guess the other question I can answer as far as tenancy, it's fully vacant now. The state of Nebraska was the last tenant, and I'm going to mess up. It was maybe 30% at that point occupied until end of 2020, roughly. They'd been moving out slowly. They just again, the previous owner had made some attempts to make it work for that space, and they just couldn't. And so it really, it's a challenging space. It was obviously designed as a department store and some additional space. It's been retrofitted for offices for a while, but it is a challenging space. And again, so ultimately looking at that, the developers are pretty excited about this, about the plan and making this work, and but that's how it came about and what we're looking at. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Questions for Andrew?
So is that why some of the first floor retail uses have moved out? Is just because maybe their leases weren't renewed? It's not because business was bad, or, you know?
That I don't know the answer to that. It would have been prior to this ownership. But yeah, it's been even a couple years ago. It might have been. The vacancy was really low, less than 50%. Even when we had the first floor, even when there was first floor, the scooters and other places, even then, the overall vacancy was really low. So yeah, there's probably a combination of that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Testimony in support of this application? Is there any testimony in support? Any neutral testimony or testimony in opposition? Any other questions for staff? Okay.
Would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Core.
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
I would move that we approve comprehensive plan conformance 22006.
Second, Ball.
Discussion.
I think finally we're seeing a project come forward that will help in renovating that space, and I'm pleased to see it.
I think this is an important historical building, the original Gold's building. And I understand, after reading some of the comments on the HPC minutes, that, in the grand scheme of things, it'd be great if we could, keep the whole thing, but I'd rather keep part of it, the original part of it, than none of it. And so, I will support this because it's important to me to save that.
Yeah.
I too want to echo what Core says. This has been a rough building for a long amount of time, especially for the people that were using it day in and day out. So it's nice to see something finally being done with it, and I think this is the best option moving forward. And if we have to take a minor adjustment to the exterior to make it work for today's world, I think that's the right direction to go.
I agree. There's, hopefully this is a project that will work in this space. Certainly there's nothing that's been brought forward that would suggest that it's not in conformance with the comprehensive plan, and I will support this motion. Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda may do so. Seeing none, I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Hey, Andrew.